So she said, I hit him. She repeated it. There was a woman standing across from her who I believe at that point said, you're hysterical. You need to calm down. You're hysterical. She repeated, I hit him. And there was a police officer who was in that vicinity kind of with us who replied, you what? She repeated it one more time. And that officer then signaled to somebody, get Goody down here, which I'm assuming would be the sergeant.
As I was ventilating, I was able to ask, did anybody see anything? What happened? And there was one individual that replied several times, I hit him.
And did you know that individual at that time?
I did not.
Can you describe the individual that said that?
I would describe her as mid-40s, average build, average height. And the other two, very similar.
And with reference to that statement of I hit him, is that something that she said once or more than once or something?
It was several times.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. There's a saying, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. In the Karen Reed case, we have a certain amount of evidence, a certain amount of clues, but the critical key missing isn't the character of a bunch of law enforcement officers, it's who is the real Karen Reed? Is she reactionary or cerebral? Is she crafty or intelligent? Is she manipulative or is she innocent? Who is she?
Who are you?
Before we get to that, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, I'll be doing a series kind of derived based on the psychology of the Gabby Petito case on self-esteem. It's a really interesting series. I've already got feedback from my Patreons. One patron described this as a fantastic essay and very worthwhile series. It's the first time I've heard true crime explored this way. So look out for analysis on that. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button and let's get started. Now, watching an animation recently from a micro channel called Asget Industries, I'll put a link to that in the description. I was struck by the simplicity of the prosecution scenario. Johnny showing being hit and the vehicle then driving off. The operative question here is whether Karen is the type of person to do this. And this is where we can invert the aphorism and ask whether it might be true in reverse as well. Is the best predictor of the past behavior we see in the present? All of this sounds very complicated when it's a very simple approach to psychology, something we call congruency. All of us tend to do the things we do in patterns that repeat themselves, patterns that are generally congruent. For example, if we're larks or morning people, we regularly wake up early. If we're night owls, we regularly go to bed late. We are creatures of habit. So larks don't behave like owls and owls don't behave like larks. In terms of the Karen Reed trial, we have a very simple question. And I put it to you, there's also a very simple answer. The question is Karen Reed the type of person who might bump into something with her vehicle and just drive off? Now, a very good way of interrogating this question is putting it to yourself or putting it in theory to somebody else, perhaps your father, your mother, a sibling, a friend. Are you the type of person who might bump into something with your vehicle and just drive off? Have you ever done that? Now, I can tell you, I am not that type of person. When I hire a rental, I obsessively check before, during, and after for any damage, even if there's no obvious incident that could have caused the damage. And I can tell you, driving my own vehicle or a rental, if I suspected I'd struck something, you better believe I'd get out my vehicle, and if it was a person, even more so. And yet with Karen Reid, we have CCTV footage of her striking another vehicle in O'Keefe's driveway. The other vehicle visibly shifts, and yet Karen doesn't stop then either. She drives away. This is, I believe, psychological congruency to the O'Keefe incident. What is easy to miss when watching the video of this collision is the driver. I'll put a link to the court TV footage and then also some other footage which is from slightly further off. She is actually turned, looking behind her, not simply looking into the rearview mirror or looking forward to the onboard rearview camera, which ought to have been going nuts as she got very close to the vehicle. She's turned, from my perspective, certainly the way I've looked at it, and after striking the vehicle, hardly pauses before quickly turning the wheel and slowly driving off. Who does that?
Who are you?
If the prosecution highlight this point to the jury, that the scenario they are presenting is essentially a hit and run, someone who is reckless and perhaps emotional, but certainly not self-aware or contrite after the fact, well, they have evidence, video footage of Karen doing exactly the same thing a few hours later. Whether it's deliberate or not is besides the point. She demonstrates that she can hit or bump another vehicle and then seemingly doesn't take responsibility for doing so, doesn't own up to what she's done, doesn't check, doesn't make sure, when I would argue most reasonable people would or should. I would, wouldn't you? The same lack of disregard she showed in her own driveway for another vehicle she backed into, though tentatively, she likely showed earlier that same evening when her blood was up and she was intoxicated. We are seeing the same psychology of a woman in two similar scenarios, in my opinion. The one causing damage to a person and the other to an expensive vehicle owned by someone else. It was someone else's vehicle, someone else's asset. In neither case, does she stop and make sure it's clear what has happened? Or does she instead drive off as if nothing has happened? It's in this sense that Karen Reid is different, I believe, from most people. Well, what do you think about that? I must say I'm astonished to be so late in this case, and there are still people who seem to have had their minds made up. It seems to be a case of groupthink no matter what evidence is brought to light. And some new evidence has been brought to light. For example, I remember being told that a shoe disappeared from the scene. I remember being told that a belt had been removed from Officer O'Keefe's jeans. And yet in crime scene photos, you see the belt is still kind of braided into the jeans. You see there is a shoe on the scene. You see multiple fragments of glass, including quite a large white fragment. And I mean, this is how lies spread. You know, you make up a story, it goes around the world 7 times in a few seconds, and it takes far longer for the facts and the evidence to be released and to reveal themselves. By then, the damage is done. And who really cares about that? And true crime will likely jump from this case to the next case, you know, and have the same kind of indignant, sensational approach. If the jury come back with a verdict that of guilty for Karen Reid, I wonder how many people will say they were wrong. I wonder how many people will keep up the posts and comments that they've made adamant of their positions. And should they be held accountable? Should they be held accountable for their errors in thinking? I wonder. Anyway, just a reminder again for the series on self-esteem. You can check that out. It'll probably be up later today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.